the little ones. Everyone's favorite these days. I'm not sure it's because of the charm of the dolls or if it's something as practical as you can always find one more space on your shelf to put one. Whatever reason, they are absolute delights. Many years ago, I wrote a book called The Little Ones, and then another time I wrote a book called In the Palm of the Hand. And I did that because that was how I tried to understand the appeal and the charm of this to a small child. And it was, to me, it was very clear. The appeal was that child, this is a small like they are. They could hold this doll in the palm of their hand. The manufacturers seem to understand this too, because both the French and German manufacturers from 1880 to 1920s produced a wonderful, wonderful series of small, tiny, all-bisque dolls. Now, what you consider small is interpretive, what you might choose to consider small. I know one very sophisticated collector of small dolls who was horrified at the thought of anything over 10 inches. Oh, no, that's much too big. Other people will go as high as 14 or 15 inches and say that's a small doll. But I have here, and Ruth Nievergelt collected the most wonderful group of small dolls. And one of the things that comes clear in seeing them, that certain manufacturers really kind of flourished in making small dolls. The Jules Steiner firm, for example, of which there are many wonderful examples in this collection, from their early little round face unmarked models right on up to the figure A of the 1890 period, always offered them in these very, very tiny, petite, in the palm of your hand size. So they must have had a really good market going for them. But the other German firms did as well. There was Jumeau with their wonderful little dolls. And on the cover of the catalog is featured this absolute gem of a doll. This is a little Jumeau, and look at that wonderful, wonderful expression on her face. It's very different, and I want to show you because the reason she's so perfectly preserved is she comes with her original box, and the box has the great advertisement on the inside, and was the clue that doesn't appear on many, many of the Jumeau boxes at all. And it says, in order to assure that you have a correct Jumeau, they carry the mark on the biolures. The biolures was if the doll was a costumed one, which this wasn't, but if she was costumed, you know, on Jumeau, when you lift the little bottom silk hem, you'll see a silk pleated ruffle underneath there. That's what is called the biolures. And always on those, when they were originally sold, they would have had a little silk label, a Bébé Jumeau. I've seen 2 in my lifetime, so extremely rare. This one doesn't have it because obviously she was sold in the original Jumeau. But the box itself is an important treasure. And actually at this point it kind of shows us how Jumeau was starting to have so much competition from other makers, not only French, but German, because this was during the time period when the Germans were also starting to make what we refer to as the Sonnenberg or look-alike French dolls. There was a wonderful collector in northern New York State who had a special name for them. She called them the Great Pretenders, and I always thought that was a spot-on kind of definition of the dolls. And for example, there are 2 of the Great Pretenders right here and right here. I think this is yes. This little fabulous little doll is by Ernst Grossmann, a German, and then this is an unidentified Sonnenberg doll, but looking exactly like an early Brew. So we had all of these going on, and that's why Jumeau wanted to protect the name on his dolls, and he was such an advocate of it. We have examples here from Schmidt. We have examples from Gaultier. We have examples from Brew. We have examples from Steiner in many models. We have some really rare all-bisque, larger all-bisque by Kestner, and just such a grand collection. I think that they were a special treasure that Ruth Nagal really loved. And I put these 2 up in the back because I wanted to show you, and I'll move her, then maybe the camera can pick it up a little better. This is the same model. This is the Jumeau Paris Bébé. And look at the difference. I'll hold her up face to face. Look at the difference in the way the modeling works and the way the painting works on the same model in different sizes by Jumeau. I happen to love this face. To me, it's the beginning of the 200 Jumeau character series, even though it was presented as Paris Bébé. Just a super doll. We have Ruth Nagal collected so many wonderful things. One of the special treasures here is a wonderful little Bebe Steiner in her original trousseau box with about 6 additional costumes, and that is an absolute treasure as well. I don't know, I couldn't pick which is my favorite. I look at them and I think it's one, and then I look at them again and I said, no, I don't know, I love this one. Look at their eyes. Again, eyes make all the difference. And to get these tiny, tiny little paperweight blown glass eyes in this tiny size had to be an extra feat of work. This is a wonderful doll because when I'm going to read something to you about her remembrances, and she came to our auction once. She only traveled once. The rest of the time we would get little letters from her saying, "Dear Mrs. Theriault," very formal, and she would ask me to look at 2 or 3 dolls in which she had an interest and ask questions about them, and then she would bid absentee. And this is the only time she came to an auction. She bought this wonderful little doll, the little Steiner, wearing its original beach costume, and it was lot number 1 in that auction, so appropriately we have made that doll lot number 1 in the auction of selling her dolls. Things come full circle, and it's such a privilege and joy to be able to handle all of these wonderful dolls. And when I read you her remembrance letter of her collecting, I think you're kind of going to agree with me on that. Let me read this to you, and the camera's going to go around and just go swish through and show you other dolls in the collection, although I do want to caution you that this is about, what he'll be showing you is about 25% of the dolls in the collection. It's just a wonderful opportunity. I hope to see you all there. We're going to be in Kansas City, and it's going to be a great day. And if you can see the catalog online now, and you can go online and look at the lots one by one in our bidding platform, or you can order a print catalog and keep it as a remembrance of this great collection. Thanks very much, and let me turn it over to the camera now, and I'll read Ruth Nievergelt's letter in the background as we do that. When Stuart went to Ruth Nievergelt's home in Winterthur to pack the collection, she had a wonderful folder prepared for him, and along with it she handed him this letter that was her notes or her remembrance of her collecting years, and I'm going to read it to you now. I grew up with a younger brother in Zurich. We did not have many toys, but as long as I can remember, I have always loved dolls. My favorite was a newborn babe that I named Fritzley. He was a Christian Christmas present when I was about 5 years old, and he was made from rubber. Over the years, he might have been bathed, kissed, and cuddled too much, and as a result, although he looked very worn, I could not bear parting with him during my whole childhood. At the age of 16, I had commercial training at the business school and served a 3-year apprenticeship. Upon graduation, I lived with a family in London to improve my English. Back in Switzerland, I worked at the Hotel Beau Rivage Palace, Lausanne, then some years for Swiss Air at the airport, and after that, at the Opera Zurich. In 1970, I married Dieter Nievergelt, and we moved to Winterthur. My husband studied architecture and art history. We both have always had an interest in history, antiques, and old objects of art. On a trip to London, wandering through the Portobello antique market, I saw for the first time an early papier-mâché. She had loops extending under the ears, exposing them and going back up into a braided bun, like Queen Victoria wore her hair at the coronation in 1837. I was especially attracted to the aura of history and past experience that surrounded her, and I could not resist purchasing this doll. Thus it all began. Today, many years later, very little has surpassed the magic of my first acquisition. Nearly all my china, Parian, and other dolls I discovered at this market or at the shop of Kay Desmond and on later visits. But since we had 2 little daughters, I had not been able to travel a bit. There were 2 or 3 dealers in Zurich selling general antiques, and from time to time a few dolls. Unfortunately, none of them ever had early dolls for sale. They did not even have knowledge of their existence. I kept asking in vain for those dolls. Maybe that was the reason why I fell in love one day with the smiling face of a German bisque-headed character doll looking at me from a shop window. This was the moment that I became infected with the doll virus, and I have not yet recovered. Now I was eager to learn more about antique dolls. Few books were available, and it was difficult to get information about my new acquisitions. There was neither a doll club nor any other organization in Switzerland where I could meet collectors to talk about dolls and share experiences. Occasionally, I came across a doll at a local flea market. I enjoyed carefully cleaning off the grime of time, restyling the old wig, washing and ironing the clothes, and if possible, putting the original outfit back on the doll, or finding appropriate clothes and accessories for her. Such finds were hardly ever ready to be on display. They were missing something or needed improvement in different ways. Some original dresses were shattered or so fragile that for saving I had them to store away. My mother, who was a tailor, and I spent countless hours working on these dolls. Meanwhile, a local auction house for antique toys and dolls was established, and then in 1982, Albert Barsotti organized the first antique doll fair in Zurich. From then on, my mother and I went to these shows twice a year. They were the highlights, and my small collection began to grow slowly. I was fascinated with the realistic features of the laughing, crying, pensive, or pouty children's faces of the German characters, and I was even more enthralled by the beauty of the idealized French bébés, and my interest in early dolls continued. Suddenly, I had many choices, but the prices went up and up every year. I realized that it is important to have a plan for collecting, that merely adding another doll is not enough. My means were limited, so I had rules. And here are her rules. Choose one expensive doll within your budget instead of several low-priced ones. The face must draw you in, but do not buy identical ones. If you are not sure, walk away. If you cannot stop thinking about a doll, buy it. It happened once that I was disappointed when I noticed I had bought a doll with a hidden damage. I can still hear my daughter Tanja saying, "Mom had a sleepless night just because of a silly doll." At that time, nobody was used to examining the heads by screening. It was 1987 when I stumbled upon a Theriault's advertisement in a German doll magazine. Since then, I have enjoyed receiving the most beautiful catalogs, and often I was successful with my absentee bids. Some years ago, in an auction catalog, I spotted my dream doll, a tiny H bébé with an incredible face. The estimated price was high, but within my range. Yet, because I expected the doll to go far too high, I decided not to bid. Afterwards, I realized I could have afforded her. I cannot say how greatly I regretted not having tried, and looking at her photo with a weeping eye, I knew I would always remember this treasure I left behind. Faces are everything. I do not know whether the visual appeal comes from the face itself or from the sharpness of the molding, the tinting and painting of the features, the cuts and placement of the eyes, or the wig. However, I know that if once that certain expression on a doll's face took my eye, nothing could put it out of my mind. And I waited for a long time until I could bring home just such an example, or even that very doll when it turned up again at a later date. Collecting has taught me to be patient, and you never stop learning. In July 2003, a wish came true. My husband and I attended the UFDC convention and Theriault's auction in New Orleans, an exciting week and an unforgettable experience. After retiring, my husband has been busy with building, collecting, and writing about architectural models. Gladly, it did not take me much persuasion to somewhat awaken his interest in my dolls. He has photographed them all, and I have described and registered every single one. Some of my dolls were documented in the following books: Collector's Encyclopedia of Dolls by Coleman, the Lexicon of Miniature Dolls, the German Doll Encyclopedia by Cieslik, Fashion Dolls by Tarnowska, the Beautiful Jumeau by Florence Theriault. Others came out of collections, and she named several of them: Rumaha Mitchell van Hoff, Elise Potter, Lucy Morgan, Madeline Selfridge, Vera Bryant, Nikki Kvitka, Estelle Johnston, Hannah Buchtas, Catherine Engels, Puppen Museum Rothenburg, Ursula Breck, Estrid Forhart, Carol Cecil Zolnar, Susan Hill, Jenny Chovet, Huguette Coupel, Lila Raitt, and Mildred Seeley. As often as possible, I have visited my doll room upstairs. The dolls are placed according to types and sizes on shelves. It is a pleasure looking as my eyes move from one doll to another. I recall where and when I acquired them and how they looked when they first came. Almost every doll has its own story. They remind me of all the events connected to each of them through the years. I have always been aware that my ownership is temporal, and one day my dolls will pass into other hands. It is my wish that they are now offered at a Theriault's auction, and those who become the new parents of my dolls will love and cherish them as I have done for many years. I think this beautifully expresses what so many of you feel about your own collecting and the kind of trials and tribulations you've had and the joys and the way that what the dolls have meant to you in your life. And I hope you've enjoyed this video and heard Ruth Nievergelt's story and looked at her beautiful dolls that she collected so carefully and so wisely. Thanks for watching, folks.